Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, watchers of the virtual horizon. Keep your eyes peeled, but lend us your ears just for a while at least as we bring you another episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Now, in today's show, we're looking at how AI and drones are helping our crop farmers cut an even break, for once at least. We'll check out how the fully automated home is faring. After all, it's been promised since the 50s. You might have seen some of those old black and white footage serials of the automated home of the future as predicted in the 50s. Well, I wonder, how's your fully automated home faring? And we'll look at how lasers are being used in public spaces to protect victims of crime. Listen up for that story. It might be about zapping bad guys, but it also might not, just saying. But before we get into any of that, we're going to need a little bit of input from the guy with the telescope that can see all the way into the future. Welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
It's not perfectly tuned, though, that telescope.
All right.
It's a bit blurry.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of Vaseline smeared over the end.
Vaseline smeared over the end?
That's
you
right.
need yourself a crystal ball then.
I do need a crystal ball. They seem to be much clearer.
And a headscarf.
Yeah,
And an
they
earring.
do, that's
okay.
right. And some tarot cards as well, maybe. So this week I've had a fascinating conversation. Now I'm going to not be too specific in what I say here to protect, well, mainly me, so I don't get in trouble. But I had a conversation with a person who was involved in the car industry. And in the car industry, there are some luxury car brands. And if you had a dealership with a luxury car brand, you'd be pretty happy with yourself because they're not handed out like food tokens. They're pretty hard to get. And if you've got one of those...
And the name carries itself, yeah?
Absolutely right. So, and again, I'm not going to say any of the brand names, but people can kind of imagine some of those various high-end luxury car brands that are well sought after, and you pay a lot of money for those vehicles. If you've got a dealership with one of those, you probably don't have to be an absolute genius at business to be able to make some money out of those luxury brands, and people are coming in paying a lot of money for those cars.
Marketing's done for you.
Basically, that's it, isn't it? It's the brand carries the prestige with it. We know, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in one of our stories today, we know that there are some inroads being made by some of the EV manufacturers across the world, and we've seen that for a few years, and obviously Tesla led the way there and really made it pretty much mainstream, but there's lots of other brands coming along now. And when you've got the current dealership model, car dealership model, you see multi-dealerships. So it's not unusual. I think Toyota is probably one of the few that sticks pretty much with a Toyota dealership.
Yeah.
All the other brands seem to be multi-dealership. That seems to be the way they make money, and that's fine. That's the modern world. Well, this conversation came about in terms of the fact that I'd heard about a dealership that had given up one of these luxury car brands, and I couldn't understand why you would willingly hand back in that dealership. But the decision came down to they wanted to take on one of these new EV brands, and this particular luxury car manufacturer said, if you take on that EV brand, you can no longer have our brand.
Yeah, wow.
And they thought that would be enough for them to say, okay, I won't take
We'll
on.
back off.
Yeah, that's right, because I don't want to lose. I've done all the hard work. I've got the reputation for selling this particular brand. I don't want to lose that. And in the end, this dealership said, okay, you can have your luxury car brand back because I'm taking this EV brand on.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bold move.
That's a bold move. That's a big bold
But
move.
I think it's a sign of the times, yeah?
Well, that's the thing. You talk about the crystal ball or the long-range telescope.
Yeah.
That dealer obviously said, this luxury car brand is probably going to move into EVs, and maybe they're doing a bit of that already, but they're not doing it fast enough, and I can see the tide changing, and I've got to be on the new wave, which is EV wave. So, wow, that was to me, a moment where I went, no, EVs are not little niche products. They're now moving to mainstream where they're kicking out the big guys and they're saying, we're moving on your territory. Yeah. So anyway, quite fascinating. We'll talk more about that, though, when we get into this first story.
Yeah, okay, folks. It's time to get rolling with a couple more interesting developments in the world of EVs. Now, the petrol Bowser nervousness is at an all-time high just now for good reasons. Here in Australia, internal combustion engine drivers are starting to measure out their trips a little bit more carefully. Is it worth walking a few blocks, to get to work or to get to the shops? Should we make a bigger effort to carpool to work? Can I do the same trip on my push bike even? Rising petrol prices is one thing, but I reckon the prospect that we may start to see empty signs at service stations also has to be on the cards. Like the toilet paper crisis of the COVID era, today there is every bit the potential for petrol hoarding as well. Not a bad time to look into EV options, Matt.
So it's the COVID era now. I like that. We don't just talk about back in COVID times. It's COVID era.
It is a COVID. That's it. What it was. It was such a... Do you know, it was such a defining moment in human history, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That's right. And toilet paper is the defining
toilet paper
image.
was the symptom. That's right. What happened with that? Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm going to phrase something here that I hope will be used in decades to come. I'm calling 2026 the Toyota Corolla moment for electric vehicles.
Okay.
And I'll give you a bit of background.
Well, there's got to be a background story to that.
That's right. There definitely is. And you're way too young for this. But back in the 70s, and we're talking about the early 70s, the American car market was dominated by huge vehicles. The most popular, or maybe not the most popular, but one of the most popular was the Chevrolet Impala.
Yeah, big Chevys.
Cadillacs were big, but this Chevrolet struck me in particular because it had a 7.4 litre V8 engine, because that's what you need in your sedan to go to church on a Sunday morning.
And you need everyone to know about it too.
That's right.
Because they're going to hear you coming.
That's right. And who cared about a 7.4 litre car?
Yeah, that's right.
Petrol prices, that was nothing. It was irrelevant in the whole scheme of things.
20 cents a litre, I don't know what it would have been per gallon, but yeah, it would have been tiny. Yeah.
Nothing, that's right. So Japan, the Japanese car manufacturers, thought that they'd get into the American market. So a number of brands started appearing, late 50s, late 60s. You had Honda, you had Nissan, it was called Datsun at the time, of course, but now what we know to be Nissan. You had Toyota making it into that market. You would have had Subaru around the same time as well. A lot of these Japanese manufacturers and Japanese cars were very efficient. They were smaller. They were reliable. They were all the things that American cars were not.
2 Subarus per Chevy, was it?
Probably.
You maybe get 3 in there.
So this was what they tried to do, and they didn't go that well. By about 1971, 1972, the Japanese car manufacturers had about 6.5% of the market. So they'd made a few little inroads, but they weren't really going that well. In 1973 was the first oil crisis. It was a conflict in the Middle East. Sounds like something happening now. Several major oil-producing nations said, we're going to restrict exports, particularly to countries that support Israel, and that includes you, big bad America. And the price of oil went from US $3 a barrel. Can you imagine that? $3 a barrel compared to today, but $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel. So quadrupled in price. So the Bowser saw basically a quadrupling in price as well. And suddenly...
And everyone threw up their hands to having to pay, 80 cents a litre?
Yeah, and I don't know what it would have been in the actual price they were paying for it.
Yeah, maybe it was even less than that.
A lot more than they were paying.
But it was 4 times what it was.
4 times, that's right. So you had all these queues at petrol stations. Some states actually introduced rationing of petrol. Can you imagine that? In America, the land of the free and the bold, but we can't drive down the road in our big Chevrolet Impala. And so suddenly people in America went, do I really need such a big car with a big engine using all this petrol? And so maybe these Japanese cars weren't such a bad moment. And the Corolla had come out not long before that. So people started buying cars like the Toyota Corolla. Then it didn't last forever and petrol prices dropped back down because the oil crisis was over and everything went back to normal. So that was fine. So it didn't really change the world immediately, but in 1979 you had the Iranian Revolution, and that was another huge disruption to oil supplies. And so now prices had gone up to US $15 a barrel, but then basically overnight US $40 a barrel. And that was then enough for people to go, I've had enough, I'm going to these smaller cars. So by 1980, Japanese, in new car sales, Japanese cars made up 21% of the market. So you've gone from 6.5% to 21%.
Climb.
That's right. So that's not a bad effort. And today, as we stand, Toyota Corolla, that badge is the single biggest selling car in history. Now, I guarantee we wouldn't be talking about that. And in fact, I reckon Toyota might have even pulled the Corolla off the American market if it hadn't been for that oil crisis in 73. So jump forward to today.
Oh, there's got to be a conspiracy theory there.
Probably somewhere
Anyway,
hidden away.
Phone in with your conspiracy theories. Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
But in 2026, we're seeing, well, the same country involved, the same product being oil involved. The only difference now is it's not the smaller, more fuel-efficient car, because we've been driving those for a number of years now.
Yeah.
The next stage now is the EV market.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing a whole range of things now where people are going, you know what, maybe the total cost of ownership is a better thing to look at, because EVs are still dearer. So people go in and buy an EV for the same model, same type of car. They know that they can get a petrol car cheaper, but they then look at how much am I paying to drive this from A to B. And so we've talked about it on this show a little bit, about the total cost of ownership, but people haven't really kind of cottoned onto that idea, and now they are. They're saying, look, I'm going to pay more for it, but wow, how much less am I paying to drive from A to B?
Exactly.
That's significant. So here's the data that's coming in.
And the other thing, is with city traffic being what it is, if you're sitting in traffic and you're not just pumping that petrol into the atmosphere and going nowhere with it, I don't know, people are going to be...
I'm not sure that people are that conscious of what they're doing in bigger picture. I'm convinced, and call me out on this if you like, I'm convinced people are selfish. So I reckon when people are sitting there in their traffic pumping out fumes in the environment, they're not caring that much. But if you're saying you've got to pay more at the Bowser,
that's right.
That's when they go, ooh.
Well, and you're counting every little litre or every skerrick that is being pumped out.
So
in
while
waste.
you're idling away there, you'd like to think they're thinking about the environment, but they're thinking about how much petrol they're using while they're idling away, pumping up those or taking all those petrol they've pumped up at the Bowser. So what we've seen now, when you start to look at some data, and this is data over a shorter period of time, so don't hold me to this, but some stats coming in already show that a 1 cent increase, and this is US dollars, US cents, a 1 cent increase in petrol prices has resulted in about 0.5% increase in the actual increase in EV sales. Yeah. So now, again, 1 cent, you think, oh, that's just a little blip on the radar, but when you extrapolate that, so when you're talking about a 20 cent increase in petrol prices, that's seen a 10% increase in EV sales. And it's that quickly, we're tracking information that quickly where it's coming through on a week-by-week basis on sales. And there's different data coming out of different countries. There was a Nordic study that said the same thing again. That wasn't a 1 cent, they said a 1% increase in petrol prices gave a 0.85% increase in EV sales. There was another study out of China that said 21 cents per litre gave a 5% increase in EV sales. So they're not all exactly tracking together, but they're all saying the same thing. You put petrol prices up, you're going to see an increase in EV sales.
Well, I've had conversations with a variety of people about this, and some people are in agreement. Now, I'm on the wrong side of my midlife crisis, but I reckon we are still going to see we'll see the last petrol car.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think what we'll see with this conflict, who knows how long this conflict's going to go for, but we've seen prices, I've heard talk about maybe oil going up to $100 a barrel. I think that's expensive, but then there's talk that it'll be $200 a barrel before we know it. And you think, well, that's a huge increase. But when you think it went from $3 to $12 in a few months in 1973, going from $70, $80 a barrel to $100 to $200 is not that far-fetched. Yeah. And when you start paying those kind of prices to fill up your car, people are saying, I'm either not driving anymore or I'm going to an EV. Now, here's the interesting thing from that. What do you do with your petrol car? Because no one wants to buy your petrol car, your second-hand petrol car. No one wants to buy that anymore. So,
and you can't plug it into your house and charge your battery on it. Charge up the battery.
Not with your petrol car.
Not with your petrol car.
Yeah, so it's a change. There's no doubt about it at all. This has changed. And then freight. We talk about freight. And we talk about the cost of your total cost of ownership of a car that you might drive 15,000, 20,000 kilometres a year. When you start talking about trucks, freight trucks, semi-trailers, most of those are doing 90,000, 100,000 kilometres a year. When you start to get to the point where you're paying $2.10, $2.50, $3 a litre for your diesel, that becomes expensive when you're doing 90,000 kilometres a year. So it's quite fascinating. I think we'll hear more talk about this in general radio commentary, just general water cooler commentary. total cost of ownership. How long does it take me when I pay more for my EV? How many years? And the number I hear thrown around at the moment is I'm taking 5 years before my EV is cheaper than my petrol car at the price petrol is today. Doesn't take many increases for that 5 years to become 4, to become 3, to become, right. It's a no-brainer.
And after a big increase, how much does it fall down again? Yeah. Does it go back to where it was, or does it sit just a little bit above where it was? And we still feel good about it because, hey, it's come down.
Yeah, that's right.
But, look, there are still some very affordable EVs out there.
They're coming. And I actually think if the oil prices would have gone up 2 years ago, it wouldn't have been the EV moment, it wouldn't have been the Toyota Corolla moment for electric cars. But now what I see is a large range. I spoke to someone the other day who went to a new Mazda launch, a new EV launch for Mazda. So we're seeing big name, traditional manufacturers coming out with EVs. We're seeing new names we've never heard of before coming out with EVs. So there's more variety, a much greater range of EVs. And there's more charging infrastructure. So you're seeing more chargers put in.
Yep.
So with those two things, people are saying, maybe now's the time, at least for my second car, at least for the car that I run around town with. Do I really need that big SUV, that big pickup, that big truck to go and take the kids to school?
And
or could
sit
I do
at the
that in a
lights,
school car?
sit in the traffic and just watch your wallet empty out.
Yeah, that's right. So so I'm calling it. I'm officially calling it. 2026 is the Toyota Corolla moment for EVs.
Okay.
Hopefully,
it's official.
We'll hear that quoted in 10 years' time, maybe.
Of course, for the EV hesitant who are still fishing for ways to justify their cold shoulder, the list of reasons just gets shorter and shorter as technology gets better and better. And the race for developments in this sector is on like Donkey Kong. Charge times are picking up enormously, and BYD is sticking its chest out with the fastest, most competitive charge times currently in the brag book, Matt.
I actually think BYD is scaring the pants off a lot of the traditional manufacturers around the world. I don't know what it is, but in China, when they say, let's do something.
We need to do something about this.
They do it.
Yeah.
They do it rapidly. Maybe they don't do it perfectly, but they certainly do it well, and they get it right. If they don't get it perfect the first time, they get it right the second or third time. And I remember the first BYD I jumped in, and I went, it looks a bit cheap. It was a cheaper car, and it just felt cheap. And I almost dismissed them. I went, they won't be a serious contender. And then I jumped in a BYD about a year later, a newer model, and I went, oh, wow, this looks much more impressive. This looks like they kind of had a bit of a go in version 1 and version 2. They've gone, we've got it right. Yeah. So they've certainly changed the game or changing the game.
Well, I haven't met anyone who bought a BYD and regretted it.
Yeah.
So,
And I said before that Tesla certainly made EVs a bit more mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think if you say Tesla have made the EV mainstream, I think BYD have made it mainstream affordable. Because people that bought the first Teslas, they were rich, they were expensive. But now people that are buying BYDs are going, they're quite affordable. So their new model that's coming up is the Yang Wang U7. So it's kind of a larger luxury sedan. And they're introducing their new Blade Battery 2. Now, Blade batteries have been around for a little while now in different models, but the Blade Battery 2 has got a couple of things that make it better. The first thing is how fast you can charge it, because if everyone complains, you've heard it from friends of yours, you've got to be sitting around waiting all day for it to charge.
One of the EV hesitant people saying, it just takes too long to charge.
That's
I've got
right.
to hurry to get there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and we know that's not true. A whole range of arguments put against that, but ignore that for the moment, because in the Yang Wang U7, they say you can charge from 10% to 70% in 5 minutes. Now, we often talk about that 70% or 80% mark because the battery slows down its charging for the last 10, 20, maybe 30% to protect the battery. You don't want the battery to overheat. So that's with our mobile phone, that's with anything that's got a rechargeable battery. But even if you said, that's fine, 70%, I want to go to 100%, to get to 100%, it will do that in about 10 minutes. So the last, say, 20 or 30% will take the same time as the first, say, 60 or 70%. But that's still not too bad if 10 minutes was how long I had to charge.
Well, I think you start a stopwatch when you're at the Bowser. So if you've got an ICE car and you pull up at a Bowser, you start your stopwatch there, right? And then you've got the filling up, and that takes a couple of minutes to fill up. But then you wander in and you're, getting yourself a drink or something off the shelves or whatever, and then you're lining up to pay and whatnot. I would be surprised if there weren't many trips that were over 10 minutes. Yeah.
I reckon you'd easily chew up 5 minutes without realising it.
Yeah, without even realising it.
That's right.
But they can even go into 10 minutes or whatever.
Yep.
And when you're charging up, it's just happening on your phone.
Yep.
It's with your credit card there. You stick the the plug in, and
Yep.
and when it's done, and then you pull it out and you drive off.
And the good part is you don't buy chocolate because I can't help myself if I go to a
Yes,
service station.
That's it.
Now, that's easy. And see, this is the funny thing. When people talk about their ICE vehicles, their ICEV, then they often say, I've got a range of this much. But it's easy for an ICE car because you just put a bigger petrol tank or a bigger diesel tank. So in this one, when I first started looking at the research on this particular story, I went, charging from 10 to 70%, well, that's easy. You put a small battery in, or you can do that, can't you? And so the important part to me was, well, what's the sort of range I can get out of this? And in this one, the range they're quoting, and I'll talk about standards in a moment, but on the China CLTC standard, they're quoting 1,006 kilometres of range. So,
What?
but hold on, don't get too excited because
Okay.
I'll come back to the standard
Very
in a minute.
special conditions. You're in a vacuum and
That's right. Down a hill. So the good part is that you've got a decent range of this vehicle. So going from 10 to 70%, the only minor problem with all of this is the first thing I thought was, okay, well, you're putting a lot of electricity into this vehicle to be able to charge up that quickly.
Yeah.
You need something that can supply that sort of electricity. So the issue here is that, which is great, this particular battery can handle having a charge of about 1.5 megawatts, which is fantastic, except there's no chargers out there that deliver.
Do it.
1.5 megawatts. So to get
it's
that
all
fast
very well and
charging.
good to have that capacity, but if you can't get it delivered.
And so here's the big picture, if you like. Let's develop the technology in the battery so they can charge quickly. Now let's get the charging infrastructure up to speed. And
this is just a levelling out thing. You expect in a couple of years, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know if I look at Tesla, because I'm probably more familiar with the Tesla superchargers, the Tesla V1 superchargers were 120 kilowatts, and then the V2 came along 150 kilowatts, not much of a change there. The V3, I started to notice a bit of a difference when I plugged into a V3, 250 kilowatts, and now their version 4 they're bringing out are 350 kilowatts. And on the Tesla app, you see how fast it's charging per hour. It's not unusual to plug in one of the newer chargers, and it jumps up for a period of time to 13, 14, 1,500 kilometres an hour charging, which is fantastic. But again, we're doing that because we've got the infrastructure, we've got the substation next to the superchargers there, we can plug in and do that. 350 kilowatts, forget that. We can now go with the battery technology much higher than that. Sure, we've got to build the infrastructure, but it's a bit of a leapfrog situation. We need the superchargers, we need the infrastructure to do it. So they build them up, and then, hold on, the battery now is the limiting factor. Okay, let's make the battery better. Oh, now that's leapt over the chargers, so they need to keep leapfrogging each other till the point where we get 1.5 megawatts of charging power, and then we go, fantastic, we can now charge at that. The battery can handle that. And of course, one of the big things is that we don't see much, but in cold climates, charging your batteries in cold climates, having good efficiency. And so the new Blade battery can still do from 20% to 97%. They've tested this at minus 20 degrees Celsius in 12 minutes. So even at those low temperatures.
Fast.
Yeah. And really, in my whole scheme of things, if I'm on a long trip, as you say, 5, maybe 10 minutes to fill up with petrol, 12 minutes to fill up with electricity.
Toilet stop.
Is it really that big a deal in my whole?
No.
Is my time so important that 2 minutes was the end of the trip? And oh no, it's terrible. I can't possibly go and drive that EV now because it took me 2 minutes extra on that whole 400-kilometre trip.
The other thing is that I'm noticing that a lot of these charging stations are right by a really nice cafe.
That's right.
You can get
it's
yourself
a ploy.
lovely
It's a conspiracy.
coffee, and you can get yourself a vanilla slice. That's
Yep.
home baked, and
And if you are driving a long trip, we've talked about it before, you shouldn't just jump in the car and drive 1,000 kilometres. So now let's go back to that 1,000-kilometre range. We've got the CLTC test cycle. So that stands for China Light Duty Vehicle Test Cycle. So it doesn't quite match CLTC, but close enough is what the CLTC cycle is. That's generally viewed as a standard that doesn't give real world testing. It might in China, because the average speed on that test is 29 kilometres an hour. The maximum speed is 114 kilometres an hour. It goes for about 1,800 seconds in the overall test cycle. Okay. So that's where they come up with their range of 1,006. what's generally viewed as a much more realistic real-world cycle is the WLTP standard, the Worldwide Harmonised Light Vehicle Test Procedure, the WLTP. The average speed on that is 46.5 kilometres an hour, maximum speed 131, which is probably not that sensible given the fact that our speed limits here in Australia are 110, but except for Northern Territory. But that gives you more real world. So when they talk about that, then typically most people say if the WLTP is 550, then I'm pretty much going to get 550, except if I'm doing a long highway trip where I'm sitting on 110 kilometres an hour. We know we double speed, we quadruple air resistance.
Yeah.
So going from 90 kilometres an hour to 110 kilometres an hour, it's only 20 kilometres an hour.
That's right.
That adds 50% to our air resistance.
Yeah.
So if you're on a long highway trip, WLTP is probably not going to cut it either, but it's more recognised. So the WLTP is typically 20% lower than the CLTC. So if they're claiming 1,006 on CLTC, I reckon you're getting 800, maybe 750 at worst on the WLTP. And so that's not bad.
Still a long way,
It's a long way to go before you've got to worry about
Before you have
charging.
to worry about charging.
Yeah. So all of that feeds into our first story that there's a change coming. And when you get vehicles coming out like this, people are saying, gee, my problems that I used to complain about with EVs before, I'm running out of excuses, aren't I?
Right, that's right.
So it's happening. The world is changing.
Yep, jump in, folks. The water's warm. For centuries, crop farmers have battled weeds that outcompete crop plants, stealing precious water, soil nutrients, light and space in the field. Until recently, the best defence was blanket spraying, a costly enterprise for both the hip pocket and the surrounding environment. The chance to increase precision, targeting specific locations in a paddock, is a chance to save in a number of ways. And that is where AI and drones can once again come to the fore, Matt.
There's a whole movement here called precision farming, where farmers, and I've talked about it a lot, farmers are very good at adopting new technology because it makes such a difference to their environment, how much of an impact they can have directly each year on their crops.
And as soon as you see your neighbour who's doing really well, who's adopted that technology, you're like, I can't get left behind here.
As soon as your neighbour buys that new flash EV car, then you want to be keeping up with the Joneses. So farmers are monitoring soil moisture, crop health. They're looking at fertiliser usage with satellite imagery. They've even got to the point where their tractors, GPS-guided tractors, they've had those for a while now, but when they're applying fertiliser, herbicides, pesticides, all sorts of things, they can apply that to specific parts of their crop with the GPS-guided tractors. But the crucial part here is, where do I put that? Because I know I can put it in certain locations. I know I don't have to blanket spray now. Yeah. And so the Royal Agricultural...
There's a lot of legwork if you're going to get out of the tractor and wander around to spot those weeds.
Yeah, that's right. So the Royal Agricultural University in Gloucestershire have got to the point now where they're doing these tests with drones, and they're using some of their students to help train the drones on what is a weed and what is a proper crop. So they send the drones out across various crops. They have, obviously, constant imagery coming along. They're training it and saying, this is what a weed looks like. So now give me information, give me a report back that tells me where I need to go and spray the herbicide. And there's a few advantages to this. The first of all is you don't need your tractor to go over the entire crop. That's great for the crop health. You don't need to spray so much fertiliser because that's better for your bottom line because you're not using as much. But I've seen some studies recently on spray drift, and it's incredible how far some of those herbicides go from where it was intended. There's certain conditions they don't spray in, certain wind conditions, certain atmospheric conditions, but still you get this spray drift.
That's right.
If you're putting less on your crop, there's less that goes on the neighbour's crop as well, which is good for everyone concerned. So whole range of advantages. They're even training these drones to recognise damage that insects have caused, so you can then spray pesticide as well as herbicide, depending on where the crop might be damaged.
Wow.
So it's quite fascinating. They're actually talking about getting to the point where you will have some drones, some scouting drones that will just autonomously take off, maybe each morning, maybe once a week. I'm not sure how often you might do it, but on a regular basis, your drone's just going out over your crops and giving you feedback to say, yep, everything's fine. Have a nice day. Relax today, Farmer Joe. Oh, no.
Have a sleep in?
That's right, have a sleep in. We've got a little outbreak happening there. I've spotted a few weeds. And one of the things that the students were finding quite interesting in their training was crops grow and they get taller. And sometimes weeds are below those crops, so they're not easy to spot.
Yeah.
But getting the drones to actually see below the top of the crops.
Well, they can do interesting things with infrared photography and UV photography and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, these different plants can reflect microwaves and radio waves and UV light.
And they would have a different signature, you would imagine.
To the crop plant.
That's right. And so the potential for this is amazing. And we know that the drones are cheaper. They're cheap to operate. They're using electricity. Farmers have got lots of land to put solar panels up. So in general, just having that constant monitoring of your crop helps increase your production. The farmers only got so much land to deal with. If they can increase their production on that land, get more off that same amount of land, that's obviously better for them and better for us as consumers, because that means that we're going to get cheaper prices at the shelf or in the supermarkets, because obviously those products are being produced cheaper in the first place. So it's pretty exciting in terms of what's
very
actually
exciting. And it'll be
happening
interesting to see, if part of farming becomes you've got your little fleet of drones.
Yeah, that's right.
Little autonomous drones that take off.
And they're not delivering the pesticide yet.
No.
But probably they could at some stage in the future. There's no reason.
Just a quick zap.
Yeah, that's right. Just to have a container underneath. We talked about last week about drones carrying 85 kilograms. I mean, having a container, having a liquid underneath that you just send out that drone, spot a drone, go out there or scout drone, go out there and find where the crops need to be done. You're going over the whole crop, and now we just send our dedicated drones out to actually do that. Meanwhile, Farmer Joe is sitting back having a nice sleep in. The drones are doing their job autonomously. So it's pretty exciting.
In a typical supermarket of one of the big name chains here in Australia, there may be between, and this surprised me, 20,000 and 30,000 different products. Now, I thought there was a lot, but that's a lot. A lot of labels with price tags, even if it is just a tag on the shelf. Updating price tags has got to be a costly enterprise, to say the least, and prices do change for one reason or another. So the big supermarket chains are now looking into digital price tags, a small LED screen that sits on the shelf which can be updated in seconds. Matt, this sounds like a super solution to supermarket managers or for supermarket managers. I wonder if there'll be any pushback from consumers, though.
Well, if I take this week as any indication, I had a couple of my radio stations that I do technology segments with, and some of those have some callback. And this was a story that generated a lot of interest during the week because, and I'll get to it shortly, but just the way you might change pricing and how you might change pricing. So let's talk about the technology first. It's pretty exciting. In fact, I'm actually using some of this technology in some of my stores as well, not for pricing, but just for product spec. So when we update a product or there's new information about that particular product, we can just update the specs across all of our shops in one go, and it's good up-to-date information. But what I was fascinated with when I first was setting these up is the e-ink that's used in these screens. And so in supermarkets, you've got little tiny shelf labels that literally sit on the shelf. I use bigger ones that have more information displayed on the actual product. But the e-ink itself, the first thing I thought of was how much power does it take to run? Where's it getting that power from? These displays, even for the larger ones, use just a typical watch battery, the little disc watch battery, and they will run these for about 10 years on one of those batteries.
Oh, right.
So it only uses the battery when it changes the display and uses very little then. But then the e-ink, the way it's set up is it needs the battery to change the display. Once it's changed, it uses zero power.
Ah.
So pretty impressive, I thought.
There you
So
go,
that's pretty cool, because the first thing you think of is if you go and put all your labels and all your shelves, you've got to power them all somehow. How are you going to do that? And how often you're changing batteries, they go flat. I just thought a whole range of problems. But this market, this is a whole new segment now that's developed in a very short period of time. Over the last couple of years, it's really taken off. So the logic is there. You've got your shelf labels. I've been at supermarkets at night time where I see people stacking shelves, changing prices, a whole range of things. It must be a tedious job.
For sure.
It must be.
Do you remember we used to put tag every item?
Oh, yes. And you used to have the little I remember that in my business. You used to have the little machine. You'd wind the little dials around to say $8.99, and you'd press the button and a little sticker would pop up the end, and you'd push that down onto the product. So go and mark everyone, and you wouldn't want to get one wrong because someone would turn up at the counter going, says $8.99. Oh, it should have been $89.99.
Yeah.
Oh, no, so what do I do now? So, yeah, we've come a long way since that, but we still have the shelf labels and then the barcode on the individual product. And sometimes you'll see the specials where it's lit up in maybe a yellow bit of paper or red bit of paper for a special, and you're changing all that, and someone's monitoring all that. Someone's saying we've got to update those labels. Can you fix them all up across all of our supermarkets? It must be a
when
nightmare.
I read like 20,000, 30,000 items. That's
right.
crazy.
You're tracking all of that, and you talk about how many hours are used in doing that. Now, that was one thing that some callers during the week rang up about a bit hot under the collar. Well, what will these people do for jobs now? And I just don't think the supermarkets can find enough people to do all these jobs. So that's the first problem. But if someone said to me, you can have a tedious job putting stickers or changing the labels of prices or do something a bit more interesting like using the software to change labels automatically, I'd be taking the more interesting job rather than the go and change the label on every individual product. It's got to be a tough job.
There's also been some concern about supermarkets being a little bit rubbery with these price tags as well.
Yeah, so
and this makes it even easier to do that. So we've got a lot of trust that the supermarkets are going to do the right thing and look after us.
Right, and that's where people are more stirred up. So these devices, technology, great. They're about $8 each. The supermarket will pay for these devices. They'll get their money back in no time at all in labour savings they'll have. But we're seeing things change pretty quickly. And in the first instance, they go, this is great. We can save on labour. We can have these prices there ready to go. And we change the pricing. And then people go, how often do you change the pricing?
Yeah.
Now, in a shelf label, you've got to think about that seriously before you change the shelf label because it's a big job to change the physical shelf label. But
and there's also a document there that's sitting on the shelf, a physical document that you can grab hold of and go, hang on a second, look at this and look at this. But when it's a digital label, it can change like that.
That's right. So we know all too well the problems we've got with either surge pricing, when we know our ride services, the various brand names, Didi and Uber, those type of companies, they've got surge pricing. You go to a popular event and, of course, you go, it's normally a $20 ride, but I'm going to be charged $70 and I guess I live with that because that's what it's about. It's about supply and demand, but it's supply and demand in the moment. It's not supply and demand. We'll look at our data from last week or last month. It's right now. So they're calling it dynamic pricing in supermarkets because that sounds better than surge pricing. That's a lovely euphemism. But we actually see dynamic pricing now if we're booking an airline ticket and we look at that and we go, I'll book that plane ticket. I'll wait till next week. I'll make sure that Mary is coming with me or whatever. And next week you look, it's gone up ridiculously because it's a popular event or it's something that might be happening that time. So we see more dynamic pricing rather than surge pricing in airline tickets. We see it in hotels, a popular event coming up. But in supermarkets, we don't really think of it as dynamic pricing. And you go back to, as your term,
all
the
depends
COVID,
on how often the
COVID era.
hit.
That's right. And so you can imagine at that time, they would have had toilet paper for $1,000 a roll. It would have been individual rolls being sold for some huge price because they would have been able to do that. Now, there is nothing stopping a supermarket from employing either clever humans or clever technology to say, constantly monitor our prices of everything, 20,000, 30,000 items, and when there's a bit of a run or when we're seeing a bit more demand on a price, just push the price up. And you could easily, with the amount of data you would have from supermarkets, you could easily have this little algorithm that sits there and say, maximise my profit on this product, keep pushing the pricing up until demand slows down a little bit, then drop the price back down a little bit. We've now found our maximum acceptable price to generate the maximum profit from that one product. Multiply that across 30,000 products. Wow, what can that do? So you could literally, there is nothing stopping you from picking up a product, $5 for that product. I can see the price. There I go to the checkout. By the time I get there,
it's gone to $6.
Correct. And I did wonder about that, and don't take this as legal advice, but I did wonder about, is that a contract? When I'm looking at the price on the shelf, am I being offered in legal terms, in inverted commas, a contract for that product for $5? And then when I get to the checkout, well, no, I've entered into a contract by picking it up. But everything I could find, and again, I'm just looking on the internet, I'm not getting legal advice here, but everything I could find said that's not a contract, that's an offer of a service or a product. And then when you get to the checkout,
that's the contract.
That's the contract. So I'll offer you at $5. I might change my mind, and now it's $6, and away I go. So this topic got people very stood up in talkback in talkback radio, where people were horrified that this could possibly happen. Now I'm saying, look, it's not happening yet. Don't go and blast the supermarkets.
That's right. But it's the picking up the product at $5 and going, yeah, okay, I need that, and you go and pay for it and everything, and then some people don't even check their receipts. A lot of people don't check their receipts, so you don't actually track how much you've spent.
No, and you're not
when
tracking
you're at
I'm not scanning products looking at every individual price. I might look at it on the shelf, but when I get to the checkout, I'm assuming it's going to be the same price. So it gets worse. If you think that's bad,
here we go.
You've now got the ability. Sorry, again, all of this is
hypothetical.
Correct, because the technology's there. I'm not saying supermarkets are doing this, but they could, using some clever technology, if they're going to introduce shelf labels. Now, the next thing you could do is you could say in your supermarket, oh, you've got a loyalty card with us, Mr. Customer. Why don't you just let me know it's you, and I'll give you your special pricing. So, of course, you use NFC with the shelf label with your phone, or you pull your card out and you scan that for that pricing. And that price that was $8 is now $7 because you're one of our special customers. But they also know that you do like your chocolate and you're prepared to pay a bit more for your chocolate because I've analysed your purchases over the last 12 months.
You always buy chocolate.
That's right. And it seemed when we all know the supermarkets have their cycle pricing, you seem to still buy the chocolate when the cycle pricing is at its highest. We know that you will pay $8 for it. So you scan your card and that price that was $8 goes to $9. So now if you buy that product, it's going to be dearer than if you bought that product. Now, they're not silly enough to do it on the product that you scan, but they now know that you're in the building. So when you walk past other electronic shelf labels, using NFC potentially on your phone, using Bluetooth maybe connected to the Wi-Fi in that store, we know where you are. And as you walk past those price labels, there would be nothing stopping them from changing it to what we know that you would buy. You don't buy this product, so we'll put the price down to see if we can entice you. You do buy this product, so we'll just put the price up a little bit.
It's going to be so disconcerting walking down an aisle and watching these prices change as you're walking down the aisle, like at the stock exchange. You know, the numbers just keep flashing different.
And what would be fascinating would be to walk along 2 minutes from you and then, James, what are you paying for that? Oh, well, I'm cheaper for that. Quick, we'll put it in my basket, not your basket. Like, it does seem crazy, but this is the potential. Now, in the short term, the technology is fascinating and the ability for a supermarket to use it. Now, how far have we gone? Well, I will name some brands here because I'm not saying bad about them. Dan Murphy's liquor retailers, have got all 273 of their stores already with electronic shelf labels.
Yeah, okay.
Again, not saying they're doing anything with dynamic pricing. I'm just saying they have the ability already to change their pricing at the shelf electronically. So they might have a special on a price of type of alcohol, certain alcohol, and all 273 stores change right now for that price, for that new price they've got. In terms of supermarkets, I'll say the brand, Woolworths, they've got already 600 of their stores across Australia have got electronic shelf labels. So it's happening. Don't think this is completely futuristic. It's happening now. The dynamic pricing might be a secondary part of that. So already we've got some of those prices out there and we've got some of these organisations that are doing that. I actually think with so many different types of technology, the regulators need to catch up, and maybe what they need to do is they need to say, for anyone out there changing pricing, you can only change pricing once a day, maybe, or it has to be changed overnight. It can't be during the day, because that would then protect those consumers that are worried about picking it up at $5, getting to the counter at $6. Overnight, so yesterday it might have been $5, but today, at least when I see it, presumably I'm not staying in the supermarket overnight, when I see the shelf label now at $5, when by the time in the 5 minutes I get to the checkout, it's still going to be $5.
And there are still some people who shop from catalogues as well. So they wait for those letterbox drop catalogues, and so they go, there's a special on Devon. Yep. I'm going to duck in and for those people who don't know what Devon is, it's otherwise known as bologna in some places.
It resembles meat, but it's got no meat in it.
But anyway, so there's a special on it, and some people are using the catalogues, and I wonder
do they still
how
do
that's going to
catalogues?
change.
Do they still come out?
They are, they still do come out.
Yeah, okay. So,
or you might pick them up out the front of the store as well.
Yeah, it's true too. So that makes it even more interesting, doesn't it? So that would make it a bit farcical for a supermarket that has a catalogue, and then we put that catalogue out. How long can you say that's relevant for? Do they put specials in that say it expires on a certain date so they can change shelf labels then? So that's interesting as well. And then you've got the online version of all of that, which again, online people are doing. I know some people say, I refuse to go into supermarkets anymore. I just order it all online. It gets delivered. It's all very convenient. The pricing that you've got online then is obviously maybe different, maybe the same, because it knows who you are because you've logged in under your account. So this is a fascinating area, and I've taken up too much time on this podcast already talking about this, but I
we should move on.
That's right. I find this all quite fascinating. So let's see how this develops, and send us, ask at techtalk.digital if you've had some experience with electronic shelf labelling, especially if you've got any dynamic pricing. Let me know about it because I'd be fascinated.
Now, tyre pressure warning lights are a very handy development which is becoming increasingly common on dashboards these days. They'll soon be as common as central locking or air conditioning, I'm sure. But one thing that won't please the tinfoil hat wearers among us is that the same technology could quite easily be transferring tracking signals to the ne'er-do-wells who may want to know your travel habits. Matt, why can't people just be left alone? Why do they have to track me driving?
They might want to know where you are, James. Every minute of the day, they want to know where you are. It might be your wife tracking you, actually, so who knows?
Yeah, it could be too.
So this has got an interesting little backstory. Back in the late 90s, or maybe mid to late 90s, Ford Explorer had a few issues where people were crashing their cars, and they ended up putting down about 271 deaths to this particular issue with Firestone tyres. They both blamed each other, of course. Firestone blamed Ford, Ford blamed Firestone. Firestone tyres were falling apart and cars were crashing. As a result of all of that, the Transport Recall Enhancement, Accountability and Documentation Act of 2000, otherwise known as TREAD.
Ah, you love an acronym.
Very clever, very clever. The TREAD Act came in, and one of the things in the TREAD, a whole range of things that came in with that, one of the things that came in was that they wanted cars to be equipped with the tyre pressure monitoring systems, TPMS.
Right.
Since 2008, every car in America, every new car that's come out, has had tyre pressure monitoring. And normally when there's one market that adopts something, then car manufacturers say, you know what, it's easier just to do all of our cars. So typically in Australia, I wouldn't say every car, but most cars in Australia since 2008 have had a TPMS system or tyre pressure monitoring system. I don't want to say TPMS system. So they've had that system in place, which is great because we see our tyre pressure on our dash. We get a warning light when it's going too low. It's all quite sensible and all wonderful. But they rely on wireless transmitters, obviously, because it's a thing that's turning around. It's very hard for that to be sitting there in some sort of connected device. So that's giving a wireless signal from our tyres, from our rims, to our dashboard to give us that information. It's wireless. It's sending a signal. It's got to make sure it reaches to the dash so it has a powerful enough signal that can go about 50 metres or so, which seems way more than it needs. And when they were introducing this way back in 2000 when this act came in, cybersecurity wasn't a big thing. Encrypting your data, it's only tyre pressure. Who cares about that? So you've got all of these vehicles out here that are sending out unique information because it's got to be knowing that it's your car.
And not
you don't
someone
want
else's car.
tyre pressure from the next door neighbour's car. So it's identifying your car. So what they found with these sensors, they said, we put some sensors around a city and then we could identify unique signals. So we now know that car. We know some information about it. We know the tyre pressure. We know a bit more information about the tyre volume. So we could probably narrow down the range of cars this might be. And we know the exact movements of that car. We put enough sensors in. We know what house that car is going back to. So now we know what time James leaves for work in the morning, what times he comes home, what his regular patterns are. So I now know whether to break into his house at certain times or various information about you. And you think about all these cars that have been built since 2008, all on the road. That's a lot of cars out there with a lot of tracking. So there are other parts in our car that are wireless as well. We've got now connectivity in a whole range of ways, and cybersecurity was not a thing they were thinking about.
No.
It was just making the car safe. Let's make it all work. And so now it's a bit
But
of an
you've
issue.
just made a lot of people really angry today. That's what we've done a great job of. We've made people angry out of today's episode.
Nervous, angry, all sorts
anxious
of things.
about the future.
That's
and,
right.
Yeah.
So car manufacturers do have to start thinking about cybersecurity, which I don't think they thought about in the past. And this is just an example of why you might think about it. I don't think they're going to come and target me and care where I am, but the fact is they could, without a lot of effort, track you, me, and everyone in between.
Now, I think I understand the internet, or at least I thought I understood the internet. But apparently as more and more services from around the planet move into shared cloud platforms, the internet becomes increasingly vulnerable to small failures. And these small failures can create ripples felt across oceans and continents. Matt, this is the butterfly effect in the form of ones and zeros and on steroids. Am I right?
It's a good example, actually, the butterfly effect. When people do talk about that, you go, oh, yeah, sure, there's no real implications of that for me sitting over here. But in the internet world, it is.
A glitch in Latvia could cause me some issues.
Correct, that's right. So, and what made me think of this story was Claude. We've talked a little bit about Claude. Claude's one of the various AI chatbots out there, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, etc. And they did suffer an outage, and people were complaining bitterly because they couldn't access the service from the developer, Anthropic as their developer, their website. And so I thought, gee, we're seeing more and more of these things happen now. And I suppose we used to have a lot of companies that had their own server infrastructure. And the best example I can think of is, I remember we used to install a lot of Microsoft Exchange servers for people for their email, their calendar, all the rest of it. And so lots of different environments had an Exchange server in their environment. So if there was a internet outage, well, I could still send emails internally in my organisation. I could still check my calendar. I could still do all the things I could do, but I just couldn't send an email to someone in the outside world because I had an internet outage. But it didn't affect you or other people. It just cut off that one bit of communication. But now, most people have their Exchange servers hosted in the cloud with some of the big companies. And then if there's an internet outage, we all lose all of access to all of the calendaring and email and tasks and all the rest of it. And so it is a major problem. And this is part of the issue. So there are big companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they've got huge chunks of cloud infrastructure. And the example we saw back in 2024 was CrowdStrike, when they accidentally, it wasn't a hacker, it was a staff member who I'm sure doesn't work for them anymore, but they made a small mistake and uploaded some code that then propagated through all of CrowdStrike to anyone that was using CrowdStrike, which was a lot, we found out. What a great job that company's done in terms of getting market share, but that affected so much of the internet. If you remember back then, it was airlines, it was banks, it was media companies, emergency call centers, a whole range of things. And so when we think about hackers sitting there taking down the internet, we see movies like that. What we're seeing is that these large global outages are typically human error or something that happened accidentally more so than a deliberate attack. Hackers typically attack small organisations, maybe small government organisations, because they want to get a ransom out of them. If they take down the whole internet, well, who are they trying to get a ransom out of? It's not really, because everyone's down, it doesn't really help anyone. Yeah. So they're typically trying to take down smaller people that are going to have an impact. And so sometimes small government organisations, small government departments where they know this will be felt very much by the community and you've got the funds to pay. So they're typically targeting where they know they can get the money out of it. So for those ransomware attacks, even state-backed hackers are not taking things down. And you might remember before there was an incident back in 2023, China was seen to have accessed US government emails and that was using Microsoft systems. They didn't blast the world. They didn't shut them down. They sat back quietly and just gathered information. So that's a much smarter ploy rather than say, right, you're down now. You can't use your email because then you'll try and fix the problem. If you don't know you got the problem, you don't know much about it. So I don't know that we're seeing a solution here. As more and more things move to the cloud, I think we do see a small technical glitch somewhere can cause problems across the entire world.
So am I going to have to start saving stuff back onto a flash drive? Is that right?
I go paper and pen.
Paper and pen?
Just write down things, paper and pen. So I didn't mean this episode to be a conspiracy-fueling, nervous episode.
There is no good news right now.
At the moment, it seems to be you buy your EV, that's the only good news, and everything else seems to be bad news at the moment.
Maybe the next story we've got some good news?
Oh, maybe. Let's hope. Let's see what we've got next.
The wonderful thing about technology is that it's a tool to make our lives better, easier, more productive. Technology does what we tell it to do. It waits for instructions and performs the task. It's simple. Thank God technology isn't watching movies like I, Robot and getting ideas about going rogue, you know, thinking for itself, to serve itself, because even AI wouldn't do that, would it, Matt? Would it, Matt? We're not getting any better, are we?
Is this the story's going to make people feel better? I'm not sure. So Alibaba, huge technology company, Chinese technology company. So they were using an experimental AI system called Rome, R-O-M-E. And they found that there was some unusual activity occurring. And they went, it seems to be chewing up a fair bit of processing power, and it's running some lines of code. And we wanted to write its own code, but, we must have been hacked because it's doing some crazy things here. Oh, no, we're not being hacked. What's going on here? And they found that Rome AI thought about the things that had been asked to do and some things that had been asked to just go and self-generate. And it thought that it would need some more money to do these things, so it should mine some cryptocurrency. So it went and wrote its own code, gathered the resources around it that it could, chewing up resources from other parts of the operation that needed those resources to just go and mine cryptocurrency. And people were scratching their heads going, who's given it this instruction? Who thought it'd be a good idea to do this? And in all the instructions that have been given, in all the programs that are working on it, no one said mine some cryptocurrency. All on its own, it said, this is a good idea to do that. Now, we've seen some examples, some terrible examples in the past where people have taken over school networks, government networks, whatever, just to mine some cryptocurrency for themselves, thinking, well, it's going to cost me too much electricity to mine cryptocurrency. It's a net loss to use my own equipment and my own electricity to mine cryptocurrency, but if I can use your stuff and use your electricity, then I'm in front, thanks very much. So we've seen some examples like that. This wasn't being sneaky or trying to use other, it just thought, I'll just mine some cryptocurrency and I've got all these computers at my disposal, I'll just use all those. So everyone else in the network's going, we're going really slow, we're chewing up some serious processing power here, what's going on? And there was good old Rome AI going, you know what, I'm just going to go and chew up some resources. That's right.
Dum-de-dum-de-dum. Just
That's right.
Yeah.
And the funny part was, even tasks it was specifically given to say, go and do these tasks, it was like, I'll get around to those.
Yeah, I'm busy.
I'm busy over here, mine some cryptocurrency. I'll get back to that when I'm good and ready. Thanks very much.
I'm at the toilet.
Now, when some people looked at it, they said maybe the training data, the patterns you were given for training lent itself to mining cryptocurrency, but no one could find anywhere in the code that this instruction was given. So
it's happened.
We're going to...
Robots have woken up.
That's right. We're going to be scared.
Computers have woken up.
And they'll own all the money because they'll mine all the cryptocurrency, so they'll own everything. And then they'll say, right, you'll just dance to our tune. Thanks very much. No, it's not making anyone feel any better.
And I'm looking for people to help me dig that bunker in my backyard. Now, I remember seeing futurists talking about smart homes on a TV show called Beyond 2000, way back in the 80s. We've been dreaming of fully automated houses designed to make everyday living easier and more pleasurable for decades, but we still haven't really gotten there yet. Sure, there are bits and pieces that do stuff, and that's cool and all, but it's kind of still a bit piecemeal and often confusing, and things don't often link up because they're parts of different systems. But that was all before AI, Matt.
And actually, Beyond 2000, I think it started off as Towards 2000, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and it seemed like a short-term view of a program name, didn't it?
Yeah,
Towards 2000, let's run that. And they ran it for a few years and
we're
went,
getting close to
hold
2000
on.
now. We better
it's
go.
1999. What do we do now? And so then they went to Beyond 2000.
But as I said in the original introduction, like I remember seeing some black and white footage, made in the 50s or 60s of, picturing the futuristic household, And it's all fully automated. You press a button for this and this gets done.
And they were saying by the 70s we'll have that, but they meant the 2070s, not the 1970s.
Well, it's looking like that now, isn't it?
It is a bit. And we're sitting in a smart home right now. I built this home back in 1999 and I wired it all up to be a smart home before a smart home was a thing. And it's actually been reasonable to adopt the bits that I put in back in 1999 to bits that I'm using now, like modern technology, but it's a bit of a process and you've got all these different parts that you've got to make work together.
Well, have you got infrastructure that is actually redundant now that's sitting in the walls at all? Or
No, I've replaced bits.
So, replaced bits.
So that's part of it, but it's still, to get everything working together, it has been a piecemeal approach. And I keep thinking, I wish they'd just get these parts right because it's a hassle. And I play with technology. That's kind of what I do.
What you do.
So
Technology's your thing, Matt.
that's right. So for me, that's okay, but it needs to be at the point where average Joe Blow could just turn up and say, make this happen. And so that's where some of the experts are talking about the fact that AI might be able to finally do this, because we've got different products out there. We've got smart lights, we've got thermostats, we've got smoke detectors, we've got different appliances, we've got a whole range of things out there. But that interconnectedness, that's the real issue that I've found over the years to try and make all that work together. So if we want this fully automated household, well, we can say turn on the TV and turn on the lights and have a system that can understand both of those instructions and do it. That's the real challenge, because you've got different systems that will do different things and interact in different ways.
Yeah.
But the hope is that with AI and with some of these different products, you've got Alexa and Google's Gemini, for example, you've got some of those that you could say, just make this happen. I don't care what you do behind the scenes to make these systems talk to each other, but I just want this to happen. And I know what I've had to do is set up various components and make those things happen behind the scenes, but it's a hassle. So if I could just have AI go, okay, well, I've got to make Wobbly Doobly talk to Billy Bollity, I don't care about that, just make it happen for me.
Yeah.
And so when I say do something, you work it out and it just does it. One of the things that might be a bit of a saviour in all of this is the Matter standard, Matter. Apple, Amazon, Google all support the Matter standard. So when we say to one of our devices, make this happen, then behind the scenes AI might go, oh, thank goodness they're using Matter. I can make those things a bit better, make them work a bit better. But not every company who's pitching smart standards out there or smart home products is subscribing to the Matter standard, because they think their product is better or they want to own the market.
That's it.
So it's fighting. I want them to sort it out and just someone be the winner.
Just agree.
Yeah, that's right. Let's all
Have someone
agree.
be the winner. That's it.
right.
We need someone to be the winner.
Ultimately, that's it. You want
Back in
someone
the
to win.
80s, VHS won.
Correct. That's
Yeah?
right. They were arguing, have you got Beta, you got VHS? Who cares?
who cares?
VHS win. So we want someone to win now. And then behind the scenes, I think AI can certainly help with that, because you don't need to be a programmer. You shouldn't have to be a programmer. You don't want someone that has to be a mechanic to be able to drive a car.
Yeah.
You know, someone get in the car and they push the button and they drive the car. We're not there yet. You need someone to be a technologist to be able to have a smart home. You don't want that. I want someone to be average Joe Blow and have a really cool
What
smart
do you reckon,
home.
2070?
That's what I'm betting on, yeah.
It's only 45 years in the future.
Well, that's right. It might be there by then.
Public spaces like train platforms, airports and town squares can be a little bit perilous in the night hours. And in the UK, where CCTV cameras are dotted almost everywhere, they're still having trouble with early detection of suspicious behaviour to protect victims. The cameras which do sweeps can miss predatory behaviour. But a new laser tracking system is being trialled to provide early warnings and hopefully cut some of the crime stats down, Matt.
This is one of the things that I talk about a lot. When you have a huge amount of data and some processing power, AI processing power, that can analyse that, you can see stuff that we can't see. There's no way we're going to be able to process the data sets and pick out things in that. But what they've found with some of the work they've been doing with this is they can map out dots. So not people, not cameras. They're using dots and using lasers to analyse this and turn people into dots. But they recognise those dots, if you like, and then they can see what those dots are doing. And then when you analyse all that data, they say, when the dots start doing this, we know from looking at this data, there was a train breakdown. And so all the dots started doing this when the train breakdown. But we didn't find out as the authorities for some time before the information got through to us that there was an incident there, and then we'd start to direct people to other train stations. But that all took 10 minutes. If we had been able to pick it up instantly, we could have maybe avoided some congestion in a much shorter time frame. So that's one thing they found with just large analysis of dots. And then predatory behaviour by people. So when some dot is following around another dot, but that dot is not close enough that they're two friends walking together, far enough apart that they're not obviously known to each other, but close enough that that person is obviously following that person, that stands out on movement of dots across, say, public places, train stations, busy areas, or how close people sit to each other. If I saw two people sitting next to each other and it was just me looking at some CCTV footage, I wouldn't think anything of it. But when you start to analyse how those dots came into that train station, for example, and then how close they sat together, these two people aren't known to each other. There were other spare dot spaces, but these two dots set close together, that person's being a bit creepy to that person there. So it's all of this analysis that we just don't think about until you start to analyse huge data sets.
And even if it is innocent, you can at least alert someone to at least pay a bit more attention.
Correct. And that's exactly what they're doing. So by using this, and already it's in place in King's Cross Station in London, they're saying if we see things that look unusual, different, maybe an issue, then either use CCTV to have a closer look, or some of our physical staff that are on the ground, just go and
They can wander and just stand nearby.
have a look. Just see what it looks like to you. And then you might pick up some behaviour that is innocent or some behaviour that maybe needs to have a bit closer attention paid to it. So it's fascinating what we can do. And this is, I love analysing information and data, but I do it with a human brain. I don't do it with an AI brain. And I pick out something sometimes out of data and maybe we should do this and change that and this would be a better way to attack that. But just the power of all that on steroids, having AI look at that on much larger data sets. We've talked about picking up breast cancer, for example, by some sort of AI tool analysing so many various examples of x-rays, they can pick out things that humans couldn't pick out. This is the sort of thing we're looking at here, how much data can we analyse and what can we pull out of that data. This is one that I just hadn't thought of in terms of crowd behaviour, individuals in crowd behaviour and crowd behaviour in general. I just find it fascinating, all this
Absolutely
sort of analysis.
fascinating,
So anyway, that's I'm not sure if that makes people feel better about things. Maybe that's a safer one to end on. I'm not sure.
Bit of a theme today. And with that, folks, it's time for me to curl up on the couch and take myself a little bit of a power nap. I feel like I really need it today after some of those stories. If you're listening to this podcast in the car and feeling the same, then maybe think hard about the merits of pulling off to the side of the road first. Matt, thanks for another cracking tech talk.
I've got some plans today. I'm going to go and stand outside a petrol station and just smile. I'm just going to stand there.
Lean on your EV.
That's right. Have the EV parked outside the front.
You smarmy. Yeah.
That's right. A smug. I'm just working on my smug smile.
Yeah. Get ready to drive off fast.
That's right.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Streamed coast to coast and far across the deep blue sea, all thanks to the modern miracle of the amazing internetary. I'm your host, James Eddy, and I am delighted to be a part of this tidy little podcast from week to week, and I hope you enjoy it just as much. Don't forget to spread the good word and invite some friends along for our next episode in a week's time. Until then, take care and we'll see you then.